there, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But wait, there's more. Look at all of this. Look at all how incredible this is. Everything in the world. There's so many humans in the world. There's so many things to learn, you know? Just as soon as you think you know something, you know, you realize that there's, you know, you've opened the door and then there's like a vast amount of context that you're completely missing.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. This is David here, and today I'm here with Erin Patchell. Erin, how you doing?
I'm doing great, David. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Well, let's forgo the warm up and just jump right into it. Positivist Group.
Very good.
Is the group that you manage. You have a number of coaches there. Talk to me a little bit about what do you do?
Absolutely. Well, first I want to say, like, I don't know when this is going to go out, but we're recording on a Friday. It's a little bit gray, but I just want to say TGIF, welcome to the weekend before we get started.
Yes.
Positivist Group is the name of the company. It sounds like it's because we are positive, right? But the positivists were really a group of philosophers in Eastern Europe back in the early 19th century. And they believed in empiricism. And, you know, they kind of fizzled out. They kind of blew up and imploded. But I've always thought it was kind of a cool name, and it has so many different layers, right? About especially what we do with coaching. You know, a lot of us coaches, we believe in positive psychology. We believe in like solutions-focused coaching. That's the methodology that I learned. And so I just love the name Positivist, just to start there. And then I support a team. I serve a team of coaches. We believe in servant leadership, right? Serve a team of coaches and support them in finding work that serves organizations that, you know, believe in values-driven progress. So we try to work with, like, you know, organizations that care about their purpose. They don't just care about what they do. They care about why they do it and how they do it. And so really we try to take like a really holistic approach to coaching within organizations and really nudge them towards that, you know, that growth that they're looking for. So that's what we do. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's about 3 years in the making now. So we're still basically a startup. And yeah, that's Positivist Group.
Yeah. Well, keep that startup vibe, right?
Definitely.
Keep that
Always.
startup, you know, scrappy and figuring things out and changing, pivoting, you know, that there's something beautiful about that side of running a business. I would imagine, like, just keeping it new and, you know, being able to attack new things every day. So,
oh my gosh, it's so much fun. You know, figuring out how to like say yes to projects, right? Like, how can we say yes and make this project as impactful as we can, without like reinventing the wheel, without like, you know, because every organization has all kinds of different initiatives that they're undertaking. And there's reasons why sometimes they're not working properly, you know? It's like, what can we do to like tie the room together? Like bring these initiatives in to really be the connective tissue that helps it sort of work better.
I'm curious about that. Is how do you, that is a good, you know, I think that is a very common thread that we're all trying to achieve, especially like we're talking about a startup culture, but whether it's a startup culture or large organization, bringing different people together with different agendas is extremely, extremely difficult, right? It is so hard. What are some of the things you do to bring diverse groups of individuals together and working together?
I mean, you'll probably hear this a lot from a lot of people, but really it's a foundation of trust, you know, getting outside our comfort zones and growing outside of our comfort zones and creating that culture around that. But trust requires a level of consistency and awareness and like interpersonal relationships. And so really for us, it's really about that first. It's really, you know, understanding the context of the organization is the first thing. And then helping to build those interpersonal relationships and bring people closer together. So especially with distributed teams, like we've got so many folks working either hybrid or virtually. We've got, people in, especially in larger organizations like yours, probably, folks are working more in silos. So how can we build a bit more of cross functionality, a little bit more kind of flow between, like, in the communication between people, and build that context? So say we're working with an individual, it's about asking those questions that help them broaden the context,
Mm-hmm.
and then focus on the specific actions, that they perhaps need to take in order to actually, and gain more context and make better decisions across the board.
Yeah.
So, it's not like magic. It's just coaching. That's
Yeah.
the tagline.
Yeah. It's hard work. All right. And it's hard work focused on the right things and values of an organization. And if you're true to those. And I am curious, like, before we started recording, you talked about some of the things you do with neurodivergent individuals
Totally.
and teams. And I think that brings a lot to the first question around how you bring different team members together and groups together. First of all, just to define, like, what does it mean, a neurodivergent individual?
I mean, there isn't like a specific scientific definition of this word. It's a word that's been, kind of was developed probably, I think, about 15 years ago, and has been
Mm,
rarely used up until recently.
mm,
Uh, but a neurodivergent individual, the definition that most people use is someone who has like a neurobehavioral, neurodevelopmental disorder like autism, ADHD, or dyslexia.
mm,
Sort of a different way of thinking. Some people also include some other like mental health conditions, like a bipolar disorder or
mm.
schizophrenia in that group as well.
Yeah.
It really just means that your brain is sort of wired a little bit differently from the standard norm, right? Even though the standard norm, obviously, there's like a distribution. So
Yeah.
we're looking at people that are sort of on the ends of the distribution there.
Okay.
Um, and so people who think differently bring different ideas, different behaviors, different values, different characteristics, different types of intelligence into the workforce.
Hmm.
So when people talk about having a neurodiverse team, they usually mean a team that includes both people who are, neurotypical, which is the kind of nice way of saying like they're, their brains are fairly normal,
Hmm.
and neurodivergent, so brains that are diverse or different in some way. And
Yeah.
they also include in a neurodiverse team. I would also include people of different cultures, people of different like religions, people with different socioeconomic backgrounds, right?
Hmm.
Because that influences the way that we think and do, and
Yeah.
and what we desire. So having a diverse team is important in many cases, but not all cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I am curious, like, I've started hearing that term more recently in the last
Yeah.
few years personally. And I'm just curious, why is it so important now?
Why is it so important now? I mean, it's a catch 22 slightly, right? The
Hmm.
more diversity you have on your team, the more chaotic it can sometimes be.
Hmm.
Um, you can have more conflict. There's lots of reasons why you might not want to have a diverse team.
Hmm.
But there's also lots of reasons why you would want to have a diverse team. Maybe not every single team in the organization, because
Hmm.
that can create some instability if the organization does not have a strong culture.
Hmm.
Um, but there's tons of research out there about diversity in teams related to creativity and innovation. Those are the two most important things. And basically change, like diverse teams are going to create a lot of change, simply because a lot of the time it's the conflicting ideas that bring about new ideas, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but it does pose some major problems for organizations as well,
Hmm.
especially if they have diverse teams and it's not intentional. There's not an
Yeah.
intention around having a diverse team.
Yeah.
There's no skills to support or manage or serve a diverse team. They haven't learned those because if there hasn't been the intention, it's just been
Yeah.
like happenstance. Like you have an international organization, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think when you just look at humans in general,
yeah,
and quite frankly, an animal,
yeah,
we're built in with bias, and bias is not a bad thing, right? I think sometimes there's connotation. Oh, it's a bad thing. It's like, actually, no. If there's a car coming really fast and you've seen this pattern before, I have a bias to not cross the road when there's
Right.
a really fast car coming. That's okay. Right.
Yeah.
But I, I think humans will try to hire people or be with people that they're similar with, like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
our friends,
Mm-hmm.
right? I will tend to someone who's similar to me, not exactly the same. But I want to hit on that point you said where you don't have a choice now. You've been given a team. This is what you got to deal with, right? You have some
Yes.
folks who think in this way and other things in this way. So how do you help people sort of, metaphorically row the boat in the same direction, knowing that there's still conflict, but how do you reduce that and actually row in the same direction?
How do you? Good question.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
I
a
go
lot
into
of
the how a lot here, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Why not? I like the why personally. I know a lot of people don't like the why, but I very much appreciate the how. I've got a operations background, so
Mm-hmm.
I do appreciate the how. I mean, there's a lot of skills you need to learn as a manager nowadays. You
Mm-hmm.
basically have to be like a behavioral psychologist
Mm-hmm.
if you want to be a great manager.
Yep.
So the skills that you're learning as a manager, I mean, the number one skill is coaching.
Yep.
You're learning the number one skill, I think, these days is going to have a lot of alignment with coaching and a lot of overlap with coaching. So if you can focus on coaching as a core skill,
Mm-hmm.
the for a minute, I'm not saying forever, but for a minute, take your agenda off the table, really try to get curious and focus on the thing that you need to get curious about, whether it's a challenge, whether it's an opportunity, whether it's a person on your team you're getting to know. You get curious about the person and then you find questions to understand and build context, for themselves. And in the, supporting someone in building context for themselves is also going to help you build context, right? So as
Mm-hmm.
they learn, you're also learning. So a manager learning coaching skills to me it's the number one skill people need to learn. And then overlapping with that coaching skill is really like the conflict management, is the facilitation, is the even like the supporting with like time management and priority management and workflow management. All of those things really come out from, I think you can make better decisions around those things. You can have better interpersonal relationships as well. So to me, when I learned how to coach, it changed everything. It literally turned my brain inside out. How did you, like, I'm curious about your experience with that, David. Like when you first took your first coaching program,
Mm-hmm.
what did you experience inside yourself?
I called out my own bullshit. I
Yeah.
thought I knew what I was doing, and I realized I knew very little. And what I mean by that is, one of the things with core fundamentals of coaching is that you do your best not to bring your own agenda
Mhm.
to the table, and yet the other side of it is that in business we're always trying to drive towards a specific agenda. And there's a balance where you can help individuals move towards the agenda without putting your agenda on them,
Mhm.
and therefore they are more likely to accomplish
Mhm.
the goal faster and with more passion.
Yeah.
And so that was my biggest realization about, there's a lot of how in coaching. And a lot of you out there listening probably think, oh, I know my stuff. I challenge you to go take a 20-week coaching program that's ICF certified. You will learn that you don't know anything. Okay. you
Absolutely.
you really don't know anything, and you got to go in there presuming that you don't know anything. um, that was my biggest realization
Mhm.
when I first jumped into that world.
100%. I could not agree with you more. Same, exactly the same. And it wasn't scary though. That's the thing. It's like it becomes almost like it's, to me at least, my experience was that realization that I know nothing,
Mm-hmm.
was such a relief.
Yes.
It absolved me from knowing everything. I
Yeah.
didn't have to be the expert anymore. I
Yeah.
could just ask, if as long as I knew how to ask the right questions, right? And that is a skill that is extremely difficult, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's difficult, especially the longer. How many people have you seen who are in how do you say more advanced years in your retirement saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I mean, there's, I'm kind of painting it, but I've probably seen more of that than the alternative, like, oh yeah, I'm learning a new language, or I'm going to do XY, whatever it might be. And there's something liberating about, no matter how long you've been doing something and you realize I know nothing and I'm a
Mm-hmm.
beginner again, and it feels good. There's a good feeling to it. And then when you just start to, become a master at it again, and you start feeling like I know something again, there's some accomplishment to it. And it just reminds me of like how you just got to disrupt yourself no matter what. I think too many of us, especially in larger organizations, we feel, oh, I know a lot and I'm just going to run my same playbook. We actually have a lot to learn still, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
much more to learn as individuals. So
Oh yeah.
disruption, self disruption.
Self-disruption. I love it. Um, I see a lot of like older adults that are really having that growth mindset, that beginner mindset, but I can totally understand like it's sometimes easy for people to just, find the right template for them and then want to like, keep reenacting the same playbook. And I totally get that too. And I
Mm-hmm.
think like with coaching, like the beautiful thing that I love about coaches is I feel like our real like intense motivation a lot of the time is to find those people and be like, but wait, there's more,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but wait, there's more. Look at all of this. Look at all how incredible this is. Everything in the world. There's so many humans in the world. There's so many things to learn, just as soon as you think you know something, you realize that there's, you've opened the door and then there's like a vast amount of, context that you're completely missing.
Yeah.
And so I try not to make any assumptions anymore.
What's the scariest thing you basically learned about that you realize, oh, I know nothing about?
Myself. When you go through, when I'm sure you've done this before. Have you been through like horrifying ego deaths where it's like you think
What's
you're
that mean?
behaving in a certain way? So, I remember there's been several times in my life where and this is even before I took coaching programs or anything, but when I'd walk through life and then all of a sudden I'd get some feedback or something, and it was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that's how I was coming across. Like you think your intentions are a
Mm.
certain way, but really they're being perceived in a different way,
Yep.
or you
Yep.
hurt someone and you didn't, it was like because you didn't have that in your contextual purview, right? Like
Yeah.
in your you weren't seeing it. It was a blind spot.
Yeah.
And then once you have to integrate that, it's like so painful and it feels like the world's spinning on its axis. So that's, I think, the hardest thing anyone can learn. It's really you're creating a new identity through that process.
Yeah. Yeah. Your your mind is, like right below that is, one of the things right below that is your identity and all the
Yeah.
characteristics that you associate with the identity. And sometimes, I've had that challenge recently where I thought I was a certain way, right? But I think in many ways, and a coach said to me, perhaps David, you've had positive reinforcement for negative behavior.
Mm,
And it really hit me. I think I had a lot of that. I have had positive reinforcement for the outcome, but not for how I did certain things. But
right.
I attached my identity to the outcomes
Hmm.
that I achieved.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize was how I was achieving those outcomes was, harmful, to myself, and but also, you didn't mean to, but you might scorch some earth along the way, right? And
Definitely.
so when you realize that, and yeah, you hit these points where you're like, oh shoot, I have to reevaluate myself,
Yeah.
and you're almost like stripping part of your identity. It's a crazy process to go through. I think everyone goes through it a few times in their lifetime, right?
I hope so. I think it makes it, well, it always makes you a better person, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I do suspect there are certainly people who don't want to have that painful process and protect themselves from that.
Yeah.
So I think that if you're willing to go through it, step into it and just keep going. Like you kind of, it's like one of those things where the only way forward is through, right?
Mm-hmm.
People need to have a certain amount of recognition for that, I think, when you're
Yeah.
willing to accept feedback and actually integrate it. Yeah.
So, Erin, just being the owner of the Positivist Group, what do you want to see change in the world?
I want world domination for good, if I'm being honest. So,
Okay. And we cut right there. That is the clip.
yeah,
No
no,
context.
that's the clip. Nope. Yeah, exactly. You got me. No, but and what I mean by that is, we try to work with businesses who want to do good in the world, who have some kind of social purpose, either for the broader world or their community, or even just their internal community within their organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why we're a little more selective about who we work with, and we feel strongly that their values are aligned, and we're seeing evidence, that this is true. Um, we do that because really at the core, what I'm trying to do is help businesses grow. I
Mm-hmm.
want businesses to grow and thrive financially. So if you go on the website positivist.ca, the first thing you'll see is purpose plus profit, right? And so I think we can have, the more profit we have as a company, the more we can put back into our purpose driven goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to help companies. We help companies grow the top line and the bottom line with the intention of then reinvesting some of that profit back into their purpose driven goals to make the world a better place. And ideally, I'm not opposed, to taking some business away from companies who don't care about that. Yeah.
So, for the ones who do want to pursue purpose and profit,
Mm-hmm.
how do you don't have to go into all the how, right? But for companies that want to pursue purpose and profit, what are some steps they can take today to move in that direction?
I mean, number one, be honest with yourself about where you are, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So be honest, know your data, right? Have your metrics, like have dashboards, really be like clear
Measuring
about
what?
what's going on. Measure it, measure everything.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
What should they measure?
It really depends on what their interests are and what their brand is.
Mm-hmm.
So if your values are more aligned with like a social impact, like I would start internally first. I would
Mm-hmm.
always start like you want your external brand to match your culture and the insides of your company. So who
Mm-hmm.
you are on the outside you should try to match that to your inside. That is usually where I would start. So your HR metrics are really important. You know, Glassdoor, sure. Retention metrics, all of those, your diversity metrics. Hopefully, you
Mm-hmm.
care about that. Doing culture benchmarking and culture pulse checks, depending on what you want your culture to look like. I think all of these things are really important. So getting some data around your people and culture,
Okay.
you know, and then making sure that you're developing it. Doesn't mean you have to revolutionize it. It just means you have to know where you are. You have to know what people care about, and what's going to take you closer to your goals. And then you just nudge your way forward. You just make sure there's continuous positive progress, in how you're moving forward. And we use a lot of things like coaching, in order to support that process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, if your insides are matching your outsides, you look as good on the outside as you do on the inside. Then we can start looking at like, what are your external goals of the company? What are those social and environmental impact goals maybe that you want to create? How do we push your brand a little further? So how do we, push the envelope a little bit, and then and we roll that all inwards as well.
Okay.
So yeah, it's an incremental approach to progress, right? And always, always, always steering people towards the profit driven motives, because we can have both as long as we're willing to get a little bit creative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yes.
yeah,
The CEO of my company says business is the greatest platform for change,
hundred
and
percent.
he lives by it. By the way, so he puts his money where his mouth is, and
Yeah,
we are very much profit driven, absolutely. But there is you also see the elements of trying to impact social causes as well. So
Of course. Yeah.
yeah,
There's huge
you could do
opportunity.
both.
The biggest business is 100% the biggest opportunity for sure, and this is why world domination for good,
Yep. Yep. World
this is
domination
how
for
we do
good.
it. Like,
Yeah.
there's no other way to do it. Right.
So speaking of world domination, you've run a podcast. You started a new podcast. You're going to
Yes.
own some airwaves eventually, right? Talk a little bit about that. Like what have you done on the podcasting front, and where are you going with it?
Podcasting, I think, is a really important media. I think all media is extremely important right now. So if you're a business that cares about getting a message out to people, you need to have a platform. Probably the same reason you started your podcast, David, I'm guessing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You want to have a platform, and not just for yourself, but for the community. It's a community project. And so the first project, Weirdos in the Workplace, and I started that when Positivist Group was basically my sole consultancy before I brought the team on board.
Mm-hmm.
And I was mostly working with neurodivergent business owners at that time, and we all felt a little weird, and we wanted to do great things in work. So it was really about building authenticity, transparency, passion, and purpose in our work.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm really excited that Eleanor Eves, who I think was a previous guest of yours recently, Eleanor and I are starting our new podcast called Executive Disruption. And we just recorded our first 3 episodes yesterday. And, they're going to be released, hopefully, staggering over the next several months. So just going to be, and everything you do, I feel like you should have a little bit of fun doing it. Like, why not? Right.
Yeah.
It's just purpose, profit, and, have some fun.
Yeah. I think you probably saw the clip somehow when I chatted with Eleanor last week. We were talking about executive presence, and then I went on a divergent pathway of talking about Riz and charisma, and and then it just went downhill from there. So, but we had fun.
Yeah, exactly.
We had fun while doing this, but yeah, the sense of building community. I feel that it's a good side effect if this does help with your brand if you have a business, right? But what I found doing this project, if you want to call it, or initiative, doing this podcast is, my goal was to learn from others, but also spread that knowledge that others have given me. And what better platform to do it than on a podcast? And I said to you right before we recorded, I'd rather have a smaller following, a loyal following of individuals who will listen and will tune in and who will share, rather than a broad base of everything and try to be everything to everyone, and talk about everything. I that's not my goal. I want to focus on a narrow group of individuals and group of people and have that impact on that narrow group of people. Right. And so, and it's fun. That's why I'm just able to just keep doing this, because I get to meet people. I get to meet people like you, and just someone like I would not have met otherwise.
Absolutely.
But it's because I'm doing a podcast.
Yeah, and so much fun. Like, it just brings me so much joy to talk to people as well and learn about like what makes them tick and how they do things, and hopefully there's some learning that people can take away from that and integrate into their own lives. Yeah.
So a couple more questions for you,
Sure.
Erin. What's something that you've changed your mind about recently?
What's something I've changed my mind about recently? I feel like I change my mind like every other day. I mean, one of the things, one of the projects that we have is called Cluedy, which is a social enterprise powered by Positivist Group. It's actually, we're developing a mobile LMS, so a learning management system, specifically with content that's developing disability inclusion in brick and mortar businesses. So that's the project. Recently I had this like vision of the project and how it was going to go, and I had a plan, and my plan did not end up going the way that I wanted it to, as these plans almost always do or do not go the way that you want them to. We didn't get the funding that we wanted, so we were hoping to get some decent capital funding at the end of August didn't go the way that I wanted it to, unfortunately. So we had to pivot. And so basically I had to think, instead of thinking about the project as like this big vision, I had to think, okay, like how can we get this to market as fast as possible with an increment that's super valuable, that like the most valuable increment basically that we can get to market right now, in order to make sure that we can, support the team and blah, 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 and not run out of money, right? Not run out of our current funding.
Yeah.
And so we had to like rethink everything that we were doing, and really think about like what is that tiny little compartmentalized piece that we can develop right away. And then we did, and we're 2 months later we're about to launch it, soft launch it actually this weekend, on Clutie.com. So what would have been it's still a work in progress. We're going to get to the final vision eventually. But I'm really, really happy with all the decisions that we made along the way. So it's kind of like reality, right? You just have to, if you can acknowledge reality, there's a lot of making hard decisions and changing your mind on something doesn't feel that difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious so it sounds like you had a major pivot there and you acknowledged reality and you made a pivot. I'm always curious for entrepreneurs like yourself. What's your framework or process when you hit a point of disappointment? What's your process to pivot?
I don't know if this is a me thing, or maybe this is like an entrepreneurial thing, or this is a learned skill. I'm not sure where that lands, but I get through disappointment very quickly. So it's almost like I'll feel it and I let myself feel it, because it's important to feel our feelings, right? That's what we're told. It's important to feel our feelings. But I feel it, and almost seconds later, it's like, okay, and now what? It's not it. I don't dwell in the disappointment, and I think that's important. I think it's important to acknowledge, like, yes, I'm disappointed. This sucks. All right, what do we do now? And then that's an open question. I'm not doing this in a silo. I'm not doing this by myself. Every step along the way has been a team endeavor. And I've made it that way because that's what prevents the chaos or like disappointment from everyone. Like it's a plan. We're to get in it together. It's resilient that way, right? It's a bit more anti-fragile, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something I've seen in a lot of entrepreneurs I've talked to here and leaders in general is just, it sounds like you have an ability to say, like, look, I'm pissed off or I'm upset or whatever it might be. You don't deny that feeling, right? You're not a robot, and you're saying, okay, cool. I'm feeling disappointed right now. But the key element I've seen is individuals who can almost detach from the emotion and look at it objectively and say, okay, what's the next step? And almost basically a mantra I use is work the problem, not the emotion. 100%. Acknowledge the emotion, but work the problem.
Yeah.
So work the problem, because that's all that matters. That's really all that matters is like, well, what do you do next?
And you need to lead by example through that. Like if you have a team, your behavior, they're really picking up on your behavior. It's like this is probably, I shouldn't say that this way, but it's a lot like having, like, children are the same, right? Like when you're in a family situation, it's very similar to a team situation. People, human beings, any interpersonal relationships that you have, people are going to pick up emotionally on each other and feed off each other, right? And so if you're in a leadership role, especially, you really need to be conscious of that and how you're leading by example through that emotional intelligence, being very emotionally intelligent in yourself and understanding and being able to like kind of compartmentalize that a little bit and then be constructive about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So 2 more questions for you. Just knowing what you know about the world and yourself now, if you had to give advice to an earlier version of yourself, what would you say to her?
Interestingly, like I was lost. I was like, I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. Like I have ADHD, which is why I originally focused on people who were neurodivergent. And so I think I had a great amount of guilt, like, or shame through my 20s about not really knowing like what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go or who I wanted to be.
Mm.
And I had no ability or I can't see the future. Nobody can. So I had no concept of like, this is there's something, there will be more, so if I could actually talk to like Erin at the age of 21 or whatever, I would say like, it's all good,
Mm-hmm.
don't worry about stuff. You've got tons of time, and you'd be shocked at how quickly you can catch up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you figure out, what your strengths are, where's the environment when we're going to excel? What are you curious about?
Yep.
What do you desire deeply, and what motivates you? And like, once you figure out those things, it's like a rocket ship taking off,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you get focused, right?
Yeah.
When you get focused on something, it is in the 20s, especially, like you see a lot of friends, starting to take a certain path. And I remember that. Oh, you're doing this now. Oh, you're doing that now. Oh, this person's getting married. This person's has 15 kids now. And, like and you're wondering like, what am I doing something wrong here? Like I haven't figured my shit out yet. Like,
Yeah.
I'm still figuring this out. But once you figure it out, and probably in my 30s, I realized like what I really, really enjoy. It just, you just accelerate, right? Because you put it's not work anymore. It's just passion, right?
Yeah.
And you go crazy with it. And yeah, it's not catching up, but in many ways you do catch up with a lot of the folks who realize things earlier, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the key is like, you have to want it. You have to want to find it. You have to want to find the answer to that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you got to experiment. You got to
Yes.
sample, try different things. Don't overthink it. It's like, is this right? Oh, it doesn't. Well, try it.
Yeah.
That's the only way to figure it out. And you'll get some valuable data and information from trying it. So, yeah. Last question to you, Erin. What's one question I should have asked you, but I haven't asked you yet?
Lord.
You haven't watched the end of any of my podcasts, have you?
No, I have not. No, I have not watched till the end of any of the podcasts. What's one question that you didn't ask me? I don't know. I'm not good with these questions. What's the meaning of life? You didn't ask me that question.
What's the meaning of life?
I don't know. What's the meaning of life, David?
Have fun along the way.
It. Let's end
Have
there.
fun along the way. Don't take yourself too seriously. Don't take the highs too highs or lows too low.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, but there's a lot of value to a lot of ancient philosophies and philosophies that have been around, like Buddhism, or you take really any religion or text out there. They try to teach people like lead a moderate life. And when I say moderate, it means this high that you're having today. Oh, I got funding. That will go away. You have to get back to work. Or I didn't get funding.
Yeah.
That goes away because you have to get back to work and live.
Yeah.
Right. So that's my answer to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the concept of time, right? Thinking about how, I don't think people think enough about time and how it impacts their life or their life over time and how that actually works. So time is a variable, stewing around that for a little bit is helpful for most people. But yeah. What's the meaning of life? I guess just keep searching for it.
There's your advice. Keep searching for it.
There you go.
Yeah. All right, Erin. So where can people find you? And if they're interested in learning more about what you do.
Well, please connect with me on LinkedIn. It's my favorite and pretty much only platform. LinkedIn.com/IN/Erin-Patchell, ERIN-PATCHELL. Positivist.ca is our main website, positivist.ca. And Cludee, CLUDEE.com is the disability inclusion customer service platform I had mentioned earlier. And if you're interested in taking a gander at weirdos in the workplace, you can look up Weirdos in the Workplace on any of your social media platform or your podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, et cetera, and YouTube. So there you go.
All right, Erin. Well, we'll share all that information in the show notes, and we'll be
Fantastic.
sure to, everyone be sure to check that out. All
Yeah.
right.
And keep a lookout for executive disruption coming to you in a few weeks.
All right. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, Erin.
Chat soon.